Hello, everybody. Welcome to another PCOS Girl live series for PCOS Awareness Month. Tonight, we are going to be joined by PCOS nutritionist Martha McKittrick, and we're going to talk a little bit about PCOS and nutrition and the things that you don't know about PCOS and nutrition. I am going to be inviting Martha, so give me 2 seconds because I've got to get all this wonderful technology set up for the live. And I hope everybody is ready for this. Okay, I invited Martha, so we're just waiting for her. I am so happy to see everybody has been sharing a lot of stories during PCOS Awareness Months and their experiences. I really think that this has been one of the more powerful years that we've had in the PCOS community for this event. Okay, and let me resend the invitation to Martha. She comes. Hold on 1 second for me. Might have to restart this. I don't know why it's not letting me add Martha. Sorry, everybody, technical difficulties. Here we go.
Yay! Not too bad, not too bad.
How are you, Martha?
Good, great to see you, Ashley.
Great to see you too, and I'm so grateful that you're coming on to share the evening with me and help spread a little more education, because there's been a lot of crazy stuff going on lately around the community and misinformation. So yeah. I feel like this is perfect timing for this.
It really is. It really is. It's crazy. It really is crazy.
Yeah, so I would love to start out with you telling everybody a little bit more about yourself and what you do in your background. I certainly know because I've known you for, about 25 years now?
Yeah. So I'm a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. And I've been a registered dietitian for, over 20 years, 25 years or so, a long time. And I've worn many hats. I'm based out of New York City. I've worked at major hospitals. I've worked in corporations. I have my own virtual practice. I've been specialized in PCOS for a long time, since the year about 2000. And I just kind of stumbled into it. I don't have PCOS. I stumbled into it. I was working for WebMD. I was running one of their message boards, and somebody had PCOS, and she was asking me questions. Turns out she lived in the New York area. I met her doctor, who was Dr. Walter Futterwhite. And he was like one of the PCOS gurus, really. You know him, right? Actually, yeah. I have his book right here. And so I wrote 2 of the nutrition chapters in the book. And, I ended up lecturing kind of across the country to people with PCOS and to physicians and dietitians and all that. So I'm super passionate about it. And when I first got involved with it, and Ashley, you know this better than anybody, I actually saw you on that TV show. What's it called again?
It was Discovery Health's Mystery Diagnosis.
Mystery Diagnosis, yes. Yeah. So I was watching the show, and it was about a woman who had all these things started happening to her, and they didn't know what was wrong with her, and it was you. It was actually, it was about PCOS, and it was the best show. It was such a mystery. And then when I was lecturing at one of the conferences, I think you were running it or doing something there in an administrative role. And you and I met, and that was, I don't know, a long time ago.
And you couldn't get rid of me ever since. So
I know.
Here we are today.
I know. But it's just I really like helping people. And I obviously, I love nutrition. I love medicine. And I just found that, PCOS is an area that people just don't know about. And we know more now than we did 20 years ago, but still we know so little about it. Physicians know a little about it, patients, we don't talk about it that much. And it's definitely getting better. I mean, we talk about it a lot now, but we still have a long ways to go. But yeah, so I just love seeing how, how it changes. I think when I first wrote the chapters in that book many years ago, actually, when I read what I wrote, I cringe actually, because we were very fat phobic back then. And I was into like artificial sweeteners and don't eat sugar and, buy everything fat free. And we were very like super low carb and counting calories. And now like, I don't do that. I take so much more of an individualized approach right now. I mean, some people maybe want to do that, but most people I don't. But it's changing. We're learning there's so much more to PCOS than we knew before. It's not everybody's not insulin resistant, but there's other things to look at, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Absolutely. And, that brings up a really good point is I think more so we're starting to understand that PCOS is so complex that there isn't one idea, there isn't one doctor, there isn't one treatment plan that is best. And sometimes it takes a combination of all these things. So my whole thing lately has been more of a multidisciplinary approach and a more sustainable approach. So finding things that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to be able to do to help you improve the quality. Because one of the things that you hear me say all the time is a lot of people say to me, oh, I heard you have to go low carb or starches. And you even have doctors saying, oh, it's all about the insulin resistance and no carbs, no starches. But it's really, that's not really the case. It's, again, improving your health, nurturing your body with the right nutrients, because a lot of PCOS patients have vitamin deficiencies or have cravings because their body isn't working optimally. So where do we start, Martha?
Yeah, I did a post today on my page on, what to do when you're first diagnosed with PCOS, because I mean, it's so overwhelming, right? So what do? You get diagnosed, you go onto Dr. Google or you go on Instagram, you look up PCOS, and almost I shouldn't say it. A lot of what you read is restriction. Like, you have to go keto, you have to go low carb, you shouldn't have fruit, you shouldn't do this kind of exercise. And if you have this type of PCOS, you have to do this. It's really complicated. And I mean, I know there are a lot of qualified dietitians. There's some great ones, and we don't talk that way. I mean, we're talking about what can you add into your diet. But the first thing you're hit when you start researching, it's restriction. It's like, oh my God, I can't ever have a glass of wine again. I can't have coffee. I can't have carbs. I have to go keto. I can't have fruit. And that's horrible. And there are much higher rates of disordered eating disorders with PCOS, and stress makes PCOS worse. And now you're told you can't eat some of your favorite foods. That's horrible. What a horrible way to live. I mean, and then you're blamed. Your doctor blames you. You should lose weight. Why aren't you losing weight? You must be eating too much. You have to exercise more, and your symptoms just keep getting worse. It's a horrible place to be in. So one of my big mantras is to think about what you can add into your diet versus supposedly what you should not eat, right? Because usually what you should not eat is not really accurate anyway. But what can you add in? Like, for example, certain foods like berries, certain fruits can actually improve insulin resistance. Whole grains can improve insulin resistance. Nuts and seeds. There's so many things that actually help your body with inflammation, gut health, and they improve all your drivers. So that's like one of my mantras is what can you add into your diet? And then the other one is, as you said, there's no one size fits all PCOS. Everybody's different because it's a hormone condition. Everybody has different hormone imbalances. Some people have issues with their thyroid. Some people have issues with adrenal androgens, and some people are highly insulin resistant. Other people aren't. So that's why you have to pay attention to your body and find out what works for you.
Right. And I think that's really a message that needs to carry over into all disciplines, is that we look at people as individuals, because somebody might have one symptom, and others may have 25 symptoms.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's strange. It's a strange syndrome. I still have no idea of how we're going to figure out what the cause is or what the treatments are. But the good news is, with doing things like lifestyle management with nutrition, proper nutrition, we can minimize a lot of the risks. We can minimize a lot of the symptoms. One of the things that I'm curious about is when you are planning out your meals, does it help to kind of like pair certain things together, or have like are there certain foods like that you should be having all the time together, a whole plate approach, or how do we go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are some general concepts that we can think of when it comes to PCOS and like meal planning. And when I use the word diet, I'm not talking about a diet. I mean diet, a way to eat when I use the word diet. So I think there are some general concepts. Like some people, it needs to be fine-tuned for the person. But some general concepts would be like, I like to tell people to try and make half of their meal vegetables if possible, and it's hard for some people if you don't love vegetables, but vegetables to me, like they're one of the healthiest groups of foods for PCOS because they're anti-inflammatory, they're high in fiber, they improve your gut microbiome. We're finding out there's a huge link between the gut microbiome and PCOS. It may even play a role in causing it somehow. So you want to eat foods that are really good for your gut and that nourish the good bacteria. So you want to eat a large veggies, different kinds of vegetables. They can also help fill you up. They can also help with insulin resistance. So they help all the drivers pretty much. So I think a first kind of guideline I would say would be try to make about half your meal, if possible, come from vegetables. And then you don't have to be on a no carbohydrate diet, but you want to choose healthier types of carbohydrates when possible. It's not always possible. I know some people, culturally in their diet say like white rice. Like I would never say you can't have white rice. But if you are pairing, like you said, if you're having some protein, some fat, some high fiber vegetables, with the carbohydrate, you can help to change the glycemic effect of the food. So even if you had a white carb and you're having the other things with it, you're not going to get that spike of blood sugar and insulin and then the crash. It'll be more kind of gentle. So I think a general rule would be to try and get lots of vegetables into your diet. They could be fresh, they could be frozen. Have some protein with it, and protein could be animal-based or plant-based. I think a combination is good, unless you follow a plant-based diet. That could be fish, it could be poultry, it could be red meat, eggs, Greek yogurt, nuts, seeds, and legumes could be more plant-based proteins. And then you want to add some fat. I like the unsaturated fats like avocado, nuts and seeds, olive oil. Those are really healthy types of fats. But fat's important too, because fat, a lot of people always say pair the carb with the protein, but we forget like fat actually has even more of an effect of blunting the rise and the fall of blood sugar and insulin. So you want some fat. You don't feel like you have to have, fat-free salad dressing and, fat-free yogurt. As a matter of fact, I think you should have full fat yogurt. And we can get to that in a few minutes about when we talk about dairy. But if you're trying to watch your weight, no, I don't mean you should be covering your food with tons of fat because it does have a lot of calories, but definitely having a fat source at the meal is good. So kind of like a balanced meal, like that's my recommendation. And this can fit with any style of eating. It could be, yes, your salmon, your quinoa, and your kale. Okay, fine, but not everybody eats that way. You could have like, something that was made in like a slow cooker, or you could have, tacos. You could have, some beans, some chicken, tacos, and a salad on the side. They can fit for any style of eating that way, that kind of balanced plate.
Right. Okay, so I have to bring two things up because we're kind of talking about what people may or may not understand. And by saying this, I'm not bashing it in any way, but I really would love more clarity. What about when people, because a lot of people in the community are always pushing keto and paleo, are they like completely terrible and off the table, or can they kind of be tweaked and be okay for patients to do those types of diets?
You know what? Like, I'm really open-minded in my approach for nutrition for PCOS. I really am. And there's a very small subset of people with PCOS who do well on keto. There aren't many studies. I mean, as far as I know, there was like 1 or 2 studies done on people with PCOS, and they're very small studies. And I think it was like a 50% dropout rate or something. But the people who stuck with it, they did improve their insulin resistance. They lost weight. But it's a very difficult diet to follow. Like I did it myself for a couple of weeks just because I have to try something if I'm going to talk about it. I didn't do it for weight loss. I just did it to see how palatable it was. And I thought it was disgusting. I really, I did. I thought it was nasty. I was pouring cream and butter on everything. And it's just not the way I like to eat. Like I just wanted like an apple and I couldn't have an apple. But some people really like that style of eating, and it connects with them, and they can stick to it. They have less cravings. They're able to lose weight more. They improve their insulin levels. But if you are going to do keto, I would urge you to do it in a healthy way as much as possible, and try and get in more unsaturated fats, like, get fatty fish, get avocado, nuts and seeds versus tons and tons of like bacon and steak and all that kind of stuff. So keto's not my first choice at all for PCOS, but I think for some people it could work. Paleo's fine. I mean, it's fine. If you want to eat that way, eat that way. It's fine. It's not, but I don't think it's being pushed too much for PCOS. I think low carb is pushed for PCOS. And again, there's a huge range of low carb. What does low carb mean? Does it mean a diet that's 20% carbohydrate? Is it 15 grams per meal? Is it 30 grams per meal? What's low carbs? That's such a generic term. I base my plans when I work with clients. It's super individualized. And, I definitely recommend the plate approach, where half your plate's vegetables, protein, some fat, and then some carb. I don't nitpick the amount unless the client wants me to, then I will. But I think if you think of the PCOS plate, that's a good way to do it. And experiment. Like, you might want some meals when you don't have carbs. Maybe you want to have zucchini noodles with a red sauce and some turkey meatballs. That's fine. Don't feel like you have to have a carb. But so I think it's listening to your body. And I think it also depends on, your activity level. If you're super active, you probably need more carbs. If you're not as insulin resistant, you can probably have more carbs. If you're lean, you can maybe have more carbs. It depends on the person. Yeah, it depends on the person. And we see some really good questions coming in, actually. I think we'll get to them. Ashley will pull them out when we're ready.
Yep, absolutely. So let's dive a little more into these foods, the specifics of some of these foods, like we were just talking about carbs. And a lot of times people don't understand what are good carbs, or I should say not good carbs, what are better carbs for patients who have PCOS as opposed to maybe like a processed carb. Is there a difference, or what should they know about carbs?
Yeah. So basically we find carbs in all fruit. We get it in fruit juice. We get it in grains, like all rice, bread, pasta, legumes, chickpeas, kidney beans, black beans, starchy vegetables like peas, corn, potatoes, and then of course snack foods, chips and all that stuff. So that's where we find carbohydrates. And in general, the role of carbohydrates is to give our body energy. Our bodies kind of prefer to run on carbohydrates for fuel. Now, all carbohydrates will raise your blood sugar and your insulin. So no matter what kind of carb you eat, even if it's like that, less processed carb, it's still going to raise your blood sugar and your insulin. Now, they do affect your body differently. When you have something that's like highly processed or an added sugar, something like candy or jelly beans or something like that, it's not giving you any nutrition. There's no fiber. There's no vitamins or minerals. Those are the kind of carbs I like people to limit. Like, I would never tell you don't ever have it, but I would say to limit the highly processed, really sugary types of carbs. So those are the ones I would really try to limit. And then there are carbs which, things like, white pasta, white bread, that kind of stuff. That's not a sugary carb, but that's a highly processed carb or a refined carbohydrate. It's been processed, the fiber's been removed. So that type of carb in general will cause a more rapid rise of blood sugar and insulin versus the whole wheat version. So those you can have, but I would say again in moderation, unless culturally that's the way you want to eat, then we can fit it in. And then the kind of carbs I like people to focus on when possible would be the whole grains. That would be like brown rice, wild rice, whole grain bread, whole wheat pasta, legumes. I'm a huge fan of beans and legumes because there's a lot of fiber and protein in them. Fruit, I would much rather see you have a piece of fruit than dried fruit or fruit juice, because the fiber slows the rise and the fall of blood sugar. So kind of I like to say, focus on the healthier types of carbs when possible, but it doesn't mean the other ones are off limits. And then you want to have them in moderation. You know, even though whole wheat pasta might be healthy, if you sit down and eat a massive bowl of it, that's not great because it has a lot of calories and it's going to spike your blood sugar and your insulin. So we still have to do moderation, even of healthy types of carbs. And then you want to have the balanced plate when you have some protein, some fat, and like vegetables with it. That again will slow the rise and fall of blood sugar and insulin.
Well, let me ask, I'm going to actually ask a question that came in because I think it kind of relates to what you were just talking about the plate, is someone asks, how much veggies should you have versus like how much protein or carbs, like when you're doing the PCOS plate? I think you said like half a plate, is it? Or
I mean, to keep it really simple, I like to try and say make half of your meal come from vegetables if possible. So if you're making a crock pot, instead of just doing, you know, shredded chicken and potatoes in the crock pot, you would add in like, you know, 1 or 2 bags of frozen vegetables. Like just try and get more veggies. If you're having tacos on the side, try to have a big salad. Doesn't have to be exactly half of a plate per se, but half of the meal you want to try and make come from vegetables. You know, if somebody wants actual amounts, like how many ounces and how many cups, like that is what I kind of do when I work with my clients one-on-one. It's more individually tailored. I could throw a ballpark number. I might say maybe aim for, you know, 6 ounces of protein in a meal and maybe, you know, a half a cup to a cup of starch per meal. I could just throw that out there. But again, it has to be fine-tuned to the person.
Sure. And that's great because somebody was asking about how you calculate how much protein to eat per meal if you're insulin resistant. So I don't know if that, like you said, it has to be pretty much individualized.
Yeah, kind of like what I do with that is I would want to figure out, you know, in my mind, I don't make my clients count calories. Sometimes people want to, but in my mind, I might be saying, okay, this person does want to lose weight. So, and they're relatively active. So maybe we'll do 1,600 calories for them. So in my mind, I'm calculating, okay, you know, I think a safe bet for a lot of people would be about 5 or 6 ounces of protein at lunch and dinner. I think that's a good place to start, and do tons of veggies and then in some fat. And then we would kind of vary the carb, you know, anywhere from maybe a half a cup to a cup if you're very active of starch.
Okay. Well, I want to ask about one more food that a lot of people have questions about with PCOS, and then I'm going to ask some of these questions because they are great questions and there are a lot of them. So another really controversial topic with PCOS nutrition is dairy, which you started to talk about a little bit. Some people are okay with it. Some people can't tolerate it. Some people are told avoid it. Some people don't feel full unless they have it. So what is your take on dairy for PCOS?
You know, I mean, dairy is a really controversial topic in any world, whether it's PCOS world or not. Like you have people who just hate dairy. There are just some people, you know, who just think that adults should not be consuming a product that comes from a cow, right? As an adult. So it's a super controversial topic. I'll start there. If you're actually looking for something that's truly research-based, there are really no studies out there that show you should not have dairy if you have PCOS. There really aren't. I mean, there's one study that says when people cut out dairy and starch, their PCOS symptoms improved. But what a stupid study that is. Like, why didn't they just do dairy? Why did they do dairy and starch? So that's not a helpful study. So we have no studies that show dairy definitely makes PCOS worse. The studies that are out there would be if you have acne, okay? There are some studies that show if you have acne, certain kinds of dairy, mainly non-fat dairy especially, might make your acne worse. It might. So, and also the other studies show if you have non-fat dairy, it might make fertility worse. There's a diet called, I have it up here on my shelf, the Fertility Diet, where this was based on, I think it was a nurse's health study, where people who had full-fat dairy, like full-fat yogurt, they had higher rates of ovulation versus people who had skim dairy, they had much lower rates of ovulation. So there's something about the fat that's good in dairy. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is that we can't say all dairy is equal, okay? Because you can have dairy in skim milk. You can have dairy in fermented Greek yogurt. You can have dairy in kefir, dairy in full-fat milk. So, you know, for the people who say dairy is inflammatory and you shouldn't have it for PCOS, the kind of dairy that's like fermented, like in kefir or yogurt, that there's many studies out there that show that kind of dairy is actually anti-inflammatory because it feeds the good bacteria. It contains probiotics. And when you feed the good bacteria, it actually helps decrease inflammation. But now to make it a little more complicated, see, it's such a complicated topic. I could talk for hours on this topic. I love this topic, actually. But now, if somebody had a sensitivity to dairy, and some people do, okay, I'm not talking about lactose intolerance. Lactose intolerance is when you have dairy, you get gassy, bloated, and all that. That's very common. That affects like 60% or 70% of the population. If they have a lot of dairy, they get gassy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you have a sensitivity to the protein that's in dairy. There's casein A and casein B. And I'm getting this mixed up right now. I don't have my notes in front of me, but one of them is actually can be inflammatory for some people. Like, have you ever seen the new milks out there? They're called like A2 milk or something.
Yes.
They're made from different kinds of cows that don't have this kind of this protein in it that might be inflammatory. So if somebody has a sensitivity to the protein in milk, it actually might be inflammatory. It absolutely could be. So most people don't have that. Okay, they don't. But then to add one more thing, one more complicating factor, there are hormones in cows, right? There are. But the thing is, we have not done the studies that say, okay, if you're having, 2 servings of dairy a day, what is this doing to your hormones? Is it making your PCOS worse? We don't have those studies, So my take on dairy is, I go by how the person feels. If you tell me when you have dairy, you feel horrible, your acne gets worse, then don't have it. But I think to tell somebody just because you have PCOS, you have to avoid dairy, I think it's very irresponsible. If somebody loves dairy, let's say somebody loves their Greek yogurt, or they want to put some feta cheese on a salad, or they just love cheese, to say you can't have it just because you have PCOS, it doesn't make any sense. There's no data behind it. It's personal bias. And maybe the influencer who is telling people not to do it, maybe they don't like dairy. Maybe it doesn't work well for them. So, but they shouldn't be saying everybody has to avoid dairy. So kind of summarize what I would say about the dairy thing is there's no solid research behind dairy and PCOS that you have to avoid it. If you are lactose intolerant and you love dairy, you can get lactose-free yogurt. You can get lactose-free kefir, lactose-free milk. You can get all that. So you can do that if you have issues. I don't think people should be consuming a lot of non-fat dairy. If you do like yogurt, I would get full fat or I would get 2%. There are studies behind that. And dairy, I'm a fan of the fermented dairy, again, like the yogurt or the kefir, because of the effects on your gut. So that's kind of where I stand. And if you love milk and you think when you have milk you have a problem, you can try the A2 milk. That's not as, I guess, inflammatory. But everybody's different, bottom line. But there's no solid research behind the statement that everybody has to avoid dairy because they have PCOS.
And that's amazing. I mean, you always blow me away with something whenever we're talking. And that just challenged my whole thought process, because when you're thinking about like dairy or limiting dairy or dairy for PCOS, you're thinking, oh, well, maybe if I have less with the non-dairy or the 2%, that's the way to go. And then I can sneak it in. But it's really the opposite. You should have, if you're going to have it, then have it, right? I mean,
yeah. And you know what? I think we have to be open-minded and curious as healthcare practitioners, or influencers, whatever. Like, I think the quality, when I see in other people, when they're curious and they're not judgmental and they don't have a one-size-fits-all approach, be curious. Hey, if a study came out next week that said dairy is the worst thing in the world for PCOS, like, I'd be on it. I'd be like, hey, don't do dairy. We don't have the research. So let's be curious, open-minded. Let's, patients can tell if they have problems with dairy. You can tell. If you know it doesn't make you feel good, don't have it. You don't need it.
Yeah.
But if you like it, have it. Don't feel like you have to cut something out of your diet because Coach Kara said you can't have it.
No, this is great, because I mean, from being in this community for so long, the burden to figure a lot of this stuff out really is placed on the patient. So having this sort of information or direction on where to go or what to look at is vital. And that also in turn helps us kind of educate some of our providers that may not be specializing in PCOS. So it's really important that we share all this information and we share these resources. So you're always great at doing that, which Thank you for.
And you know what, like what is heartbreaking to me is like, for example, I did a post the other day on nuts, right? I was saying nuts have health benefits for PCOS, and somebody wrote in and commented, oh, well, I heard nuts were bad for PCOS, and I read they're bad. If you read something, if somebody says something, like, where are they basing their evidence off of? Like, just because they say something, just because they have, 200,000 followers and they say something, it doesn't mean it's true. I know we just went through this whole thing with various health professionals who've said things that aren't accurate, but just a large following does not equal scientific evidence. So just question, okay, why nuts bad for PCOS? Like, are there studies on it? Like, go into PubMed yourself, do a search. PCOS and nuts. See if you come up with some studies that show it's bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or ask me. Come to my page and ask me.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you guys, you have, if you're not following her already, it clears up a lot of stuff. She's always has content going on her page. I don't know how you do it all, quite honestly. We did have one question that came in that I'm going to take a stab at, and then I'm going to ask you to also chime in on it. But someone asked, how do you find out if you're insulin resistant? That really comes down to going to your doctor and getting blood work done. And also there are a lot of times some physical symptoms that can go along with insulin resistance that may indicate to one of your medical professionals that you may be insulin resistant. Some of those things would be the weight gain, certainly. There's another condition called acanthosis nigricans, which are the dark skin patches that you see in the folds of your skin. Sometimes when your insulin levels are really high, you'll start seeing those darkened skin patches. Skin tags are another thing that we don't talk about a lot, but that can also come from insulin resistance as well. So it's a combination of a doctor looking at the physical symptoms, and then of course doing the blood work to see what your blood sugars may be, to see whether or not you're insulin resistant. And Martha, do you want to add into that as well?
Yeah, diagnosing insulin resistance is really, really tricky because there's no one really agreed on test to do that. You could have your fasting insulin levels checked and they could be normal. It doesn't mean you're not insulin resistant. And also you can have normal blood sugar and it doesn't mean you're not insulin resistant. So it's really tricky. Like, the only really accurate way, but we don't do it in the real world, is called the insulin clamp. It's where, you have a needle stuck in one arm, a needle stuck in this arm, and they are able to exactly tell. They do that in research studies. So there's no great test. If I had to pick one test that probably is the best, it's a 2-hour glucose tolerance test with insulin levels. Then they give you a big load of glucose. They can kind of tell what is your body doing in response. Do you oversecrete the insulin? So that's the best test. A lot of doctors don't do that. Here in the US, like, a lot of doctors don't do it, I know. So that's probably the best test. And then, then you can look at if you have elevated fasting glucose, we can kind of assume you probably have insulin resistance. If you have an elevated A1C, you probably have insulin resistance. If you have a high triglyceride and a low HDL, probably insulin resistance. And I use signs and symptoms a lot. Like, in addition to what Ashley said about the acanthosis nigricans and the skin tags, I look at, where do you store your body fat? Do you tend to have a belly, or do you store more of your weight in your butt and your thighs, that area? If you have more of a belly, that's very indicative of insulin resistance. And if you have a really hard time losing weight, that can also be indicative of insulin resistance. But even some very lean people who you wouldn't think are insulin resistant, when they go on metformin and they start to ovulate, that means they're insulin resistant, because that helped with the ovulation. So it's tricky. It's tricky.
It is. So staying on that topic for a minute, is it okay to marry nutrition with things like supplements and medications? Because I think a lot of times it's pounded into our head that PCOS, the only way to do it or reverse it is through lifestyle management with nutrition and exercise and stress reduction. But sometimes that's not really enough, right?
It's not. It also makes you feel like a failure. Like, if you have to go on a medication, let's just say that your blood sugar is a little bit high, and you do everything you can, and you can't get it down, and you have to go on some kind of medication, you're not a failure. Or if you go on spironolactone because you're having a lot of hair growth and you just can't get a handle of that with nutrition supplements, you're not a failure at all. And I think that's one of the problems with social media, is they try to kind of drill into your head that, you know, medications are bad and you should do it naturally, and don't take meds. I think we should start trying to do things naturally with lifestyle, with nutrition, sleep and exercise and all that, and supplements, which we can talk about. And if you're not getting the results that you want, medications are okay. The only thing I'll say is to make sure you understand what the medication is doing. Make sure you understand the potential pros and cons. You know, are there side effects? How long do you have to stay on it for? You need to understand that. Is it safe to do if you're trying to get pregnant? Really understand the medication. Don't just take it because the doctor says take it. But supplements, yes, I'm a huge fan of supplements. I'm a huge fan of targeted supplementation, not just everybody take this. You know, they have these quizzes online. If you have this kind of PCOS, these types, which they're not really real things. There aren't really types of PCOS. There are phenotypes, but there aren't types. You know, if you have this type of PCOS, then take this supplement. It's not targeted. You have to look at you, your symptoms, and all that, and then certain medications are appropriate for you.
Right. So I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but someone had asked, with the fermented dairy, would it be inflammatory if you have histamine issues? I'm not sure if you have read anything on that.
You know what? That's a really good question. And I could get that answer as you and I are talking, Ashley. I can pull that up, and I will get that answer to that person.
Awesome.
I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't.
No. That's, you know, that's what I'm saying with like PCOS. It's a never ending process of learning and researching and finding resources. There, unfortunately, because it is a syndrome, it means it's a combination of symptoms and severity, and a lot of other issues come into play, and there's not always a easy answer.
Yeah. I'm just looking at my list of high histamine foods, and I'm not seeing dairy on that. If that person wants to DM me, I will do more research and get the answer to them. But I'm not seeing it as a high, but I might be wrong.
Okay. So another person asked a question about dairy, if raw milk and raw milk products have the same effect versus pasteurized milk products.
They would. I mean, but it's just in terms of like, I guess in terms of like inflammation or lactose intolerance, I guess.
I'm not sure.
I mean, it would have the same amount of protein. It just wouldn't have. I mean, you know, honestly, I have to research that too. I think I would want to know more with their question. Are they referring to inflammation? Like what are they actually referring to?
Yeah. I don't know.
There are some studies also that I should add, and I've seen online that people say dairy worsens insulin resistance. Fermented dairy, there's actually some research that actually improves insulin resistance. So fermented dairy should not be the bad guy.
Right. What about like other fermented foods like kimchi and things of that nature? Are they good as well?
Yeah, they contain probiotics. See, people get very like caught up on, you know, just taking probiotic supplements, which is great. That's a whole other area we could probably talk about too. But I like people to start with foods that contain probiotics naturally, and that will be things like fermented dairy. It doesn't have to be. There's also non-dairy yogurts. It doesn't have to be cow's meat, you know, that kind of yogurt. But yeah, things like kimchi, fermented vegetables, real sauerkraut, pickles that are kind of fermented in brine, not the vinegar. They can all have some probiotic effects.
Right. Now, there are two questions here that are kind of more medically oriented. So I am going to preface it by saying anything that I respond to, I am a previous orthopedic nurse, so my specialty is not in PCOS as far as treating it, but I will give you my opinion based on my background and my knowledge and my experience. However, it is never a substitute for the doctors that you work with or that specialize in medications for PCOS. So one question is, when do you recommend giving metformin for PCOS patients? Again, I am not a doctor, so I can't recommend that, but that's really an individual choice as far as what your goals are and what symptoms you are dealing with. So if you're having a really hard time losing weight and you're doing everything nutritionally appropriate and the scale's not moving, you're not seeing improvements in some of your symptoms, then maybe it's time to talk to the doctor to do the blood test to see how insulin resistant you may be. And they may recommend metformin, but there are also other options. A lot of people use Inositol or the Inositol, which, Martha, maybe you could talk a little bit about the Inositol, because metformin sometimes can be really harsh on the body, but people with PCOS tend to tolerate the myo and the Inositol a little bit better. So from a nutritional perspective, would love to hear your opinion on the and myo.
Yeah, definitely. So the inositols, it's kind of like a sugar. It's almost like a B vitamin also that our body produces. So it's naturally found in the body, and there are many different kinds of inositols that's naturally in our body. And so think of when they actually have a lot of different roles in the body, but one of the functions of the inositols is to help to get the sugar from the blood into the cell. So I like to think about, envision when you eat carbohydrate, your blood sugar goes up. So after your sugar goes up, your pancreas makes insulin. The role of insulin is to open the door, get the sugar into the cell. But with PCOS, there's a defect in that door. It doesn't open that well. So normally what inositol does, it kind of helps to open the door. It's like you're ringing the doorbell to open the door. But studies have shown with PCOS, you may not make enough inositol in your body. So you not only now are you insulin resistant, but you're not making enough inositol to open the door. So by supplementing with the D-chiro in the myo-inositol, you're giving your body what it's not really making, and you're helping to get the sugar into the cell, so you're improving your insulin resistance, basically. And that is one of my favorite supplements for PCOS is inositol. I do like the combination of myo to D-chiro inositol. Some healthcare practitioners just use myo, but I do like the combination of myo to D-chiro, and I like it in the ratio of 40-1. And I know somebody asked, are there any actual studies and journals on that? Yes, there are. Like, I don't recommend supplements for PCOS unless there are truly studies. If you go to PubMed and you do a search on, myo-inositol or D-chiro inositol in PCOS, you're going to find hundreds of studies. It's highly researched. And nothing's magical. Supplements are not magical at all. But I will say, in my experience, I've had a lot of patients and people in my Blueprint course, which is launching in 2 days, by the way. I've had a lot of people have a lot of success when they start taking that. Like, all of a sudden, they get their period, and it can take 3 months to really work. But all of a sudden, they ovulate, they get their period, they have less craving. So it can help to lower testosterone. It can help with ovulation. It might help with cravings. It may help to lower cholesterol, to decrease inflammation. So there are a lot of potential benefits to that supplement. So I do like that supplement. And I think that's one that, you kind of can't go wrong with. I do think it helps in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And then we had another question, which, again, this is kind of a tough question to answer, but someone asked, can I get off birth control and control that with proper nutrition? And I think that really comes down to the individual as well, as far as like the symptoms and what their ultimate goals are, correct?
Yeah, and that's something that you have to decide amongst yourself with your doctor. And I've had a lot of private clients come to me because they were afraid to get off the pill, because they thought when they got off the pill, their symptoms were going to just go nuts, and they were going to start all of a sudden growing a lot of hair or losing hair, the whole thing. You like Ashley said, you need to think about the reason why you're on the pill in the first place. I like to get somebody on like a super nutritious diet, get them on the right kind of supplements, get everything in place. And then if you want to try to come off the pill and see how you do, at least you're already set up, you're repleting any deficiencies that you had, your diet's really on track, and then you could try to come off the pill if that's what you want to do, that you'll talk to your doctors about.
That's wonderful. So we're coming up on 7:45, and I don't want to keep you for too long, but I'm wondering if you had any final words or any advice, and of course, please let everybody know how they can find you and connect with you. But if you had any final thoughts for everyone as far as nutrition and moving forward.
Yeah, I think I think that there's so much that you can do from a nutrition, lifestyle, and supplement standpoint with your PCOS. And I know it's really hard because somebody wrote in there and said she felt defeated, and I totally get it. You can feel defeated and you feel like you're not getting anywhere, you're treading water, you're not getting anywhere. And I think you just have to kind of, have the mindset, take it slow, one step at a time. I think the worst thing you can do is go online, read all these things that you have to do, go out and spend, $500 on supplements and do all these things, and you get overwhelmed. I think take one step at a time. I like it when people journal. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and it's just one of the things that really work for a lot of my clients. Just start to write down, what you eat, the time you eat, how you feel, how much sleep you get, what you did for movement, maybe some positive mindset things in there. Just start to pay attention to your body. Like notice, hey, my body feels better when I have eggs and avocado than when I have oatmeal. So just start to really pay attention to your body. Follow people who kind of bring you up and give you good information. If you're finding somebody who's stressing you out, unfollow them. I unfollow people all the time. And it's so much easier said than done. Oh, get a good doctor. Like, it's a very privileged thing to say because not everybody can do that. But I think you can be your own advocate and just start doing some research and just find out, hey, these are the labs I think maybe I should get. But start working on, moving your body, and I'm actually, I'm doing an IG live tomorrow with Coach Ginny, Be Fit with PCOS, tomorrow at noon. She's fantastic. She's highly qualified. And we're going to really talk about what kind of exercise is best for PCOS because there's so much out there that's confusing. And we're going to talk about how to help motivate you. So she's a really positive person to follow. I love Dr. Gretchen Kubacki, although she's not super active here. She has a really good book, The PCOS Mood Cure. I love this book. So there's a lot you can do. Start with set small goals. Maybe start working to get more sleep. Maybe try to walk a half an hour a day. Just add small things in. Think about the good things you can add into your diet. Try and get in more vegetables. Make your meals balanced. And then there's the whole mindset piece. I mean, there's so much I could say. It's hard to just give a couple tips, but there's a lot that you can do. And definitely, ask me any questions on my page. I love it when people ask me questions, and I make a lot of, if people ask me questions, I'll make like a video or a reel on it. And then like Ashley said, I'm launching my online course actually Wednesday, the doors open. It's a 7-module course. And I keep my enrollment really small, so you can ask me, like somebody I know asked about probiotics. Like, these are things I talk about in my course. Like, you'll get really individually tailored information in my course. I have live Zoom calls, I have Instagram, I have Facebook Lives, and there's a ton of information in the course. And a quick little tip, if you get on my waiting list, you will find out I'm having a secret sale tomorrow. You can save a lot of money. So the whole course would be $397 if you get on the waiting list. But yeah, so that's a great way to get information.
And honestly, guys, I'm not just like saying this. The course is phenomenal, and the support that you get throughout her course is phenomenal. I loved having like the Facebook group and being able to connect with you in a group and feeling like you're part of something when you're going through the journey. So that in itself was worth everything with that course. It's amazing. And you also gave me a perfect segue because there are a lot more Instagram lives coming up throughout the month. Martha will be having some. I will also be having, Dr. Gretchen will be here with me later on this month.
She's so good. I'm like her groupie. I love her.
And you're also going to get a double dose of Ginny because she's going to do the live with Martha, and she's also going to be doing a live with me. So you can learn everything you need to learn about movement, but definitely check. Martha and Ginny together are such a phenomenal team. I love watching their
Ginny's
content.
in my course. I forgot to say that. Ginny, you have the option to work out with Ginny in my course for 8 weeks. You get 5 workouts a week with her tailored to you. She does weekly check-ins with you, and it's only $10 a week. It's super reasonable. So yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. And again, that goes into that whole philosophy that I was talking about earlier about that multidisciplinary care and adding in all these different elements. It's so important. Martha, I love you to death. I thank you for taking the time to be with me again this evening and to help educate us on nutrition and PCOS and all of the wonderful things you do. So thank you for your commitment, your love, your support for this community.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for all that you do. You're never ending what you do for this community. I don't know how you do it. You don't ever stop. So thank you for everything you do.
You're welcome. And what it is when you find a love for something and a love for people, it's something that you continually want to do. Yeah. And that's how I feel. It's just a love for the community. But everyone, this has been PCOS Girl's Instagram Live series for PCOS Awareness Month. And make sure to check out Martha at the.pcos.dietitian here on Instagram. Follow her, please, because she's incredible. And check out the schedule for more upcoming lives happening this week. Martha, have a wonderful evening. Thank you. And this live will be living on my timeline and sent to Martha for her timeline as well. Awesome. So thank you, everyone.
Everybody. Thanks, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.